Hello everyone, this is Josh Weiner from the New Literacies and Emerging Technologies summer class. Now that the summer is wrapping up, I'd like to look back on my original thoughts on what literacy represented and talk about how my impressions have evolved and expanded over the past few months. One of the first assignments I performed for this class was to join the message board discussion in which we contributed our thoughts to the question, what is literacy? Two general areas of consensus emerged. 1. Being literate is often equated with how well one is able to read and write, and 2. There's really a lot more to measure when evaluating one's literacy. Being able to synthesize and evaluate text is a critical literacy skill, and those texts go well beyond the written word. Literacy largely comes down to one's encoding abilities, that is, how well can they evaluate a different setting and then decide how to proceed. Some people may be tech savvy but not have a knack for wilderness orienteering, and for others the contrary may be true. Different strokes for different folks, as they said. Those were some of my initial thoughts on the subject of literacy and how it applies to classroom learning. In the weeks that followed, all those thoughts substantiated a great deal. Here are a few ways how. For one, we talked about the literacy skills that are most important in our particular domain of instruction. For me, that is history and social studies, and here are some of the particular items I identified as important literacy skills in that field of study. Some of these I already knew about from my background as a history student. For instance, I've long been instructed on the importance of being able to cite sources and balance primary and secondary ones in my research. Others I hadn't really thought about much before. How does one articulate an opinion differently as the group size increases exactly? But all of them are worth considering as I go about improving my grasp on what is literacy as part of this course. Another key point from this class is that literacy is overwhelmingly concentrated in the digital landscape these days, and thus it is very worthwhile to prepare students to navigate that landscape within the classroom. A lot of the platforms we were introduced to in this class, including WebQuest, scaffolding, and data simulations, serve bifold purposes in my opinion. One, they make the actual content being taught fun and cool, and two, they help students to adapt online problem-solving skills, which are bound to be critical in many other contexts in our digital age. That was very rewarding to consider. And lastly, one general point to keep in mind is that literacy is very dependent on ongoing trends. I wrote about how virtual reality is one trend that is increasingly influencing history and social studies classes, but there's a ton of other options I could have written about as well, given how many other forms of technology are making their ways into the classroom. My general takeaway is that literacy isn't a static concept. If it were, then all we would measure literacy by is how well one could read medieval age Bibles. Literacy is ever changing, and that change is accelerating in the contemporary era. Teachers would do well to be on top of that change. So now the question is, what does all this insight onto what is literacy mean for us as consumers, producers, and teachers of texts? So when it comes to consumers, I would say that we have to be considerate of the chances to build upon literacy that may exist around every corner. Video games, I observed in one of the message boards on this class, may not be thought of as brain food so often, but they do indeed incorporate problem solving and landscape navigation like other forms of literature. So just keep a mind open about opportunities such as these. Okay, so as for producers, really, the big takeaway for me is that we have to keep things digital. That's the way of the future after all. I had fun working on my mystery scavenger hunt using Goose Chase, my digital scaffolding project about Dulce de Cormest, and so on. I would encourage other teachers to take this same digital path if they want to hear more cries of, "Oh man, that's cool," within their classes. Okay, and lastly, what do teachers of text need to remember when it comes to literacy? I would say it's that we need to be mindful that different people are stronger with different tools and literacies than others. Last semester we learned about that through the Universal Design module and the different ways to accommodate student learning preferences. This semester we went even further by learning ways in which teachers can allow their students to be guided by their own preferences within the classroom. That's where projects like Choose Your Own Adventure and the branch narrative come into play. It's an effective way to allow students to become more enthusiastic learners. by letting them do things their own way. Alright, so those are my expanded thoughts as to what literacy is. It's not limited to reading and writing, it's not static, it's so much more. Peace out, y'all.